You are not a nice person. You are afraid. And everyone around you already knows it. Every time you laugh at a joke you don't find funny, they see it. Every time you change your opinion the second someone pushes back, they feel it. Every time you say, yeah, sure, no problem, while dying inside, the room reads it. You think you're being polite. You think you're keeping the peace. But the truth is brutal. You are leaking weakness, drop by drop, every single day. And in this video, I am going to show you exactly how, where it comes from, what it costs you, and how the Ronin inside you, the one that still exists, can be rebuilt. Stay with me, because what I'm about to say will make you uncomfortable. That's the point. Let's start with the biggest lie you were ever told. That being nice is a virtue. It's not. Niceness, real niceness, comes from strength. From a person who has standards, who can say no, who doesn't need your approval to feel whole. That kind of niceness is rare. That kind of niceness is respected. But what most people call nice, that's just fear wearing a polite mask. Think about the last time you said yes when you wanted to say no. Maybe it was your boss asking you to stay late. Again. Maybe it was a friend who needed a favor. Again. Maybe it was someone walking over a boundary you've never actually defended. And you smiled. You nodded. You said, of course, no problem. And then you went home and felt hollow. Here's what happened in that moment, psychologically. Psychologists call it the fawn response. You've heard of fight or flight. Most people know freeze. But fawn, that's the one nobody talks about. Fawn is what happens when your nervous system decides, the safest thing I can do right now is make this person happy. It's not a choice. It's a reflex. A reflex that was probably useful when you were 7 years old, and the adults around you were unpredictable. But you are not 7 anymore. And that reflex, the one that kept you safe as a child, is now slowly destroying your credibility, your relationships, and your self-respect. The samurai had a word for a man who lives by the approval of others. They called him useless. Not cruel, not evil, just useless. Because a man who cannot hold his own ground cannot hold anyone else's either. He cannot protect. He cannot lead. He cannot even be honest. And here is the part that no one tells you. People don't respect the person who always agrees with them. They might like you, they might use you, but they don't respect you. And somewhere deep inside, neither do you. Now, let's get specific. Because cowardice is not just a feeling, it's a pattern of behavior. And once you see the pattern, you cannot unsee it. Tell number 1, you over-explain. When a person with strong boundaries says no, they say no. When a coward says no, they say, I'm so sorry, I would really love to help, but I have this thing, and my schedule is, and maybe next time, and I feel terrible about this, but you don't owe anyone a paragraph for your decision. The fact that you give one tells the room everything. No is a complete sentence. Tell number 2, you change your opinion under pressure. Someone disagrees with you. Their voice gets slightly louder, and suddenly, well, you make a good point. Maybe I was wrong. Were you actually wrong, or were you just afraid of friction? There's a difference between genuine reconsideration and social collapse. One is wisdom, the other is cowardice. Tell number 3, you hide behind humor. This one is subtle, and this one hits hard. When something bothers you, do you say it, or do you make a joke? When someone disrespects you, do you address it, or do you laugh it off and spend the next 3 days replaying it in your head? Humor is a gift. Humor as armor. That's avoidance. That's you protecting yourself from a conversation you're too afraid to have. Tell number 4, you wait. For the right moment. For the right conditions. For someone to give you permission. Musashi wrote this in the Book of 5 Rings. There is nothing outside of yourself that can ever enable you to get better, stronger, richer, quicker, or smarter. Everything is within. Everything exists. Seek nothing outside of yourself. You are waiting for something outside of you to change. Nothing is coming. The right moment is a myth invented by people who are too afraid to act in the wrong moment. Miyamoto Musashi was not born fearless. That's the part of the legend nobody tells. He was an orphan, an outcast, a man with no clan, no master, no status. In feudal Japan, that meant nothing. You were nobody. You were a ghost, and he chose to become the greatest swordsman who ever lived. Not because he had no fear, but because he decided that dying with fear unresolved was a worse fate than dying in combat. He fought over 60 duels. He never lost. But his real battle, the one he wrote about for the rest of his life, was the battle inside. In the Dokudo, his final work, written 9 days before his death, Musashi listed 21 rules for life. Not rules for sword fighting, rules for living without weakness. Rule 1. Accept everything just the way it is. Not because the world is fair, not because your circumstances are good, but because the moment you stop accepting reality, the moment you need it to be different before you can act, you have handed your power to an illusion. Rule 7. Never be jealous. Jealousy is cowardice in disguise. It's the emotion of a person who looks at someone else's life and decides, that should be mine, but I cannot build it myself. The warrior doesn't envy. The warrior studies. He looks at strength and asks, how? Not, why not me? Rule 17. Do not fear death. Now, you might think, that's extreme. That's samurai philosophy. What does that have to do with my life? Everything. Because you are not afraid of physical death. You are afraid of social death. You are afraid of being rejected, of being judged, of someone thinking less of you. And that fear, that tiny, invisible fear, is controlling your entire life. Every silence when you should have spoken, that was fear of social death. Every dream you didn't pursue, that was fear of social death. Every version of yourself you buried to fit in, that was fear of social death. Musashi faced real death. Every single day, and you can't send one uncomfortable email. Now let's talk about the science, because I don't want you to just feel this. I want you to understand it. Inside your brain, there is a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. Its only job is threat detection. And here is the problem. Your amygdala cannot tell the difference between a tiger and your boss's disappointed face. Both trigger the same chemical response: cortisol, adrenaline. The nervous system goes into emergency mode. This is why your heart races before a difficult conversation. This is why you freeze before you send that message. This is why you rehearse what you're going to say, and then say nothing. Your biology was built for a world that no longer exists. And the coward, the one living inside you, is just your amygdala making decisions for the rest of your life. But here is what neuroscience also tells us. The amygdala can be trained, not eliminated, trained. The prefrontal cortex, the rational part of your brain, can learn to override the panic response, but only through repeated exposure to discomfort. Not comfort, discomfort. Every time you do the thing you're afraid of, your brain updates its threat model. Oh, we spoke up in that meeting. Nobody died. We said no to that person. The world didn't end. We held our ground. And we're still here. This is what Bushido understood long before neuroscience had a name for it. Courage is not a trait. Courage is a practice. You don't wait to feel brave, you act, and the feeling comes after. Always after. So what do you actually do? Not philosophy, not metaphor. What do you do? First, you audit your yeses. This week, every time you say yes, ask yourself one question. Am I saying this because I want to, or because I'm afraid of what happens if I don't? You don't have to change anything yet. Just start seeing the pattern. Awareness before action. Always. Second, you practice micro-courage. Most people think courage means doing something enormous. Quitting your job, moving countries, starting from zero. No. Courage starts with the small moments everyone ignores. Sending the message you've been drafting for 3 days, saying, "I disagree" in a meeting, ordering what you actually want at a restaurant instead of what's easiest to pronounce. These are not small things. These are reps, and every rep builds the muscle. Third, you redefine the goal. Most people want to feel confident before they act. That is backwards. The warrior acts first, feels the fear, acts anyway. And confidence is the scar tissue that forms afterward. You are not trying to eliminate fear. You are trying to carry it without collapsing. That is the whole game. Musashi wrote, "Today is victory over yourself of yesterday, not over your enemies, not over your circumstances, over the version of you that existed 24 hours ago." That's it. That's the entire philosophy. You don't have to become a different person overnight. You have to become slightly less afraid than you were yesterday, and then repeat that every day until the man in the mirror is someone you actually recognize, someone you actually respect. The coward dies 1,000 times before his death. Shakespeare wrote that. Musashi lived it. Every avoided conversation, a small death. Every swallowed opinion, a small death. Every dream postponed indefinitely, a small death. You don't get those moments back. But you do get this one. Here is what I want you to take from this. You are not broken. You are not weak by nature. You were conditioned. By school, by family, by a society that rewards compliance and punishes edges. But conditioning can be undone. It takes time. It takes discomfort. It takes the willingness to be wrong in front of people who are watching. But on the other side of that discomfort, there is a version of you that speaks clearly, that holds ground without anger, that helps people, not from fear, but from choice. That is the warrior, not a man without fear, a man who decided that fear does not get a vote. If this hits something in you, share it with one person, not for the channel, for them, because someone in your life right now is losing to the same battle. I'll see you in the next one.